Hi, everyone. Welcome to the How We Hustle podcast.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Tanya. And we invite you to join us in our unfiltered conversation about the real life hustle of being an entrepreneur. For more information about the podcast, check out howwehustlepodcast.com.
Make sure to check us out on Instagram at How We Hustle Podcast. You'll find information on new episodes as well as notable quotes from the episodes we do. So come check us out at How We Hustle Podcast on Instagram.
Okay. This is awkward, but I feel like we owe it to everybody that listens to this podcast to talk about this topic. Mike and I feel really awkward talking about this. And we both said that we're kind of scared to talk about it before I pressed record. But I think that it's doing a disservice to everybody as an entrepreneur if we don't talk about it. So I figured we would talk about feeling like an imposter and sharing how both of us don't always feel like the kind of person who should have a podcast or who should be in this position or should even who I identify as. Like, can I really say that? Who am I? What have I done? And my life doesn't always look the way that it is supposed to look as a successful entrepreneur, quote unquote. And that can be hard to show up and always portray yourself to be a certain way and to feel a certain way. And when you don't always feel like that, right?
Yeah, like we've been doing this for 2.5 years now. We've tried to record regularly. And we've both, a lot has changed, a lot has evolved. And, you know, some days we feel awesome and some days we feel drained, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, you know, the imposter syndrome comes in where it's like, who am I to then get on this podcast and, you know, talk about this subject? Like, who am I to do that?
And to pretend like we always feel successful or that we're always having success or that everything is always working, because it definitely is not always working. And we are still having failures and feeling like, can I really do this? I don't really necessarily know if that feeling ever goes away because it certainly hasn't gone away yet.
It would be easier, you know, like after like 2 years of figuring it out, we finally figured out how to schedule our recording sessions. And it's like, I'll be honest with you, today when I saw that notification go off on my phone, I was like, oh God, I don't want to do this today. But it's not because I don't want to, like, it's just because I'm not feeling, I'm feeling a little bit like an imposter right now. And I don't necessarily have, you know, my glass half full, like at this very moment, you know what I mean? I say that, I saw that you made a post about that. So, but we gotta stick to the schedule. And the reason we're talking about this now is because you and I were like, what's going on right now, and just not feeling so. We don't always feel energized, you know, like the glass is half full, but we do it anyway. We keep each other accountable. We get on the podcast. We try and talk about what is going on and try and offer, you know, some content that will be relevant. And what is relevant, like what people connect with, is not always what's going on in their head. Is that people want, you know, people want us to share what's going on, even if it's not like glass is always full, right? Like people like hearing vulnerability, not that they like it, but they can connect and resonate with it. So when we act vulnerable and, you know, are willing to admit that imposter syndrome does creep in, even after doing this podcast for 2.5 years, I think that is a helpful message that we're sharing.
Yeah. And I think that for me, it's like if we were to come on here and pretend like everything is always hunky-dory every single day and we feel super successful and things are always working for us, I just feel like that's telling other entrepreneurs that this is what entrepreneurship should look like. And in fact, entrepreneurship is, I would say, more like difficult than it looks. And I'll never forget, like when I first started my business and like you talking to me about, you know, all these things and how it can be lonely and all this stuff. And I was just like, no, I don't think that will happen to me, and how wrong I was, because it is lonely. Like, it's always on you. And it can be very difficult to always be a self-starter, to always be on task, to always have a schedule of things to do, because again, there is no accountability outside of having an accountability partner, and having like deadlines or employees that hold you accountable. But outside of that, like, it's like you have to pull yourself together every day and get things done. And some weeks I'm very productive, and other weeks I get nothing done. And a lot of the time, even with my clients, like, we can beat ourselves up about that. Like, oh, I'm just not an entrepreneur this week, or, oh, I'm not successful this week, or, oh, this big failure happened. And I did that, to be honest. I'll be fully honest. I don't think I really got back to myself after the whole situation last fall with my team, like firing my team, and realizing that I had zero recurring income. And when I went through that, like, I don't necessarily think I really got back to myself until last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, because I didn't feel like this badass person that I used to feel like I was. At that time, everything had just like been working and things were just moving, and I felt like I could do no wrong. And then I got a big humbling moment in those couple of months. And I have been like pulling myself back up, and maybe like physically I've been back in my business, but emotionally and mentally, like, I don't necessarily think I really felt back to myself until about 2 weeks ago, when, I don't know, I think that what I realized then was that just, there's seasons where we're really motivated, seasons when we're not, seasons when everything is working, and seasons when it's not. Like, seasons when nothing you do is working. And maybe that's because you're just meant to take rest, or maybe that's time where you're meant to, take a break, because it's not exactly like something I say to my clients all the time is that this is our life. Like, somebody said to me yesterday, oh, you weren't on vacation during the long weekend. No, there is no such thing as a long weekend for me. Like, like, my business doesn't stop. My clients don't stop just because it's like a statutory holiday. We don't get statutory holidays. And so if this is our life, like, how do we manage to be motivated all the time, to be on all the time? It's unrealistic for us to expect ourselves to feel that way all the time. We can't always be go, 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 go. But then also, I feel like not feeling like you're go, 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 maybe that's a sign that you are not supposed to be go, go, go right now. Maybe the universe is sending you a sign that there's a reason that you feel this way right now.
Yeah, I guess so. So how did you, like, I mean, I know how I did it, but when you're not feeling like you have your cup full, how do you show up to podcasts? How do you do it? Like, what's your trick?
I don't really have a trick. My trick is to be honest, which is what I said to you today. It was like, I'd rather that we come on here and just like tell the honest truth of like that I don't feel so great. I don't feel so successful today, or I don't feel like podcasting today. Like, I'd rather come on here and be like, this is the truth. This is how I feel. And that's okay. Because if I'm feeling like that, if you're feeling like that, Mike, that means that every other entrepreneur is feeling like that. And that is the thing that can connect with people. So when I go through hardships in my life, or sometimes I can't talk about it at the time, sometimes I just retreat and watch TV or go for walks or listen to music or something like that, or hang out with people. But I've learned over time that it's okay for you to not feel like that. That doesn't make you a failure. That doesn't mean that you won't ever be successful. That doesn't mean that you can't help people. That doesn't mean that you are an imposter. It just means that if this is happening for you, this is also happening to millions of other people. So maybe it would be in service of them to just share more vulnerably, even when it feels uncomfortable. And even when I don't want to share, if I share it and I tell the honest truth, then maybe I'll actually connect with someone and I can help someone feel less alone.
Yeah, and that's sort of the approach that we use today, right? Like, we kind of got on, we started chatting about it, and we were like, but we flipped it, right? We took what we were feeling and figured out how we could make it of service to others, make it valuable, how we can take our experience and help other people, or just relate it to other people, because we're definitely not the only people that don't feel jazzed up every single day when there's stuff that needs to be done. But like, this podcast is one of those things that just needs to be done, right? It's one of the things that we do, and if we don't meet our obligations to each other and to our schedule, and to keep it coming out regularly, then it's going to fall apart, right? So it has to be done. So we can get on here and we can complain to each other about how we don't want to do it, or we can just turn lemons into lemonade and turn it into a sweet nectar that people will drink up.
Yeah, and I just think like it's definitely, I just feel like we owe it to everyone, like when we all do. I feel like that's kind of something social media has gotten in the way of. I think it would be beneficial to everybody if we were all more real, right? If we didn't just pretend that everything was so good. I'll be honest, I've been watching some like old reruns of some really old shows that I used to watch in my teenage years. And like, it's so funny how like dramatic they are about life. But sometimes I feel like this is like, we need to say these things. We should be able to talk more about our real feelings rather than just pretending that everything is okay all the time. Like, everything is not okay all the time. And I think it's really exhausting to keep that up, to pretend that you are always okay. And I think it just does everybody a disservice, because now then they need to pretend that everything is okay. And then when you ask someone how they are and you get scared by their answer or something, like, then you shouldn't have asked how they were. Like, I wish that we were having more real conversations than having conversations that were just like pretend. And like, as you said to me before we hit record, like feeling inauthentic, right? I think the most authentic thing we can do is to show up and be ourselves and be unapologetic about the fact that you don't feel okay, or you're not always on. And I really truly think that people choose you because of that authenticity. And if you have the courage to come on here and say, you know what, some things didn't go my way this week, or I just don't feel motivated this week, or, and sometimes also just retreating. Like, you don't always have to be on and in front of people. I think that's another exhausting thing about our job, is that we are expected to be on social media every minute and sharing everything every minute. And sometimes like we're allowed to just like take time for ourselves. We're allowed to experience something and make it private as well. Like, and then share it when you're ready. But I think it's the most authentic thing we can do, is to share the truth and not sugarcoat it. Because if we're going through it, someone else is definitely going through it. So if you're going through it, like, real talk, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not weird. You're not a failure. You're not an imposter. It's just that people, if you feel like an imposter, just know that everybody else feels like an imposter sometimes too. And there was a time when you didn't feel like this, and you will get back to that. I think it's like a cycle, it's cyclical. And if we ignore those things, like if we ignore the fact that like you just don't feel great right now and you don't take rest and you just push through, I feel like then you're going to be stuck in that position for much longer. So instead of pushing it or sweeping it under the rug, like, speak it up to existence, like, talk about it, own it, and then move through it, like, feel it, experience it, listen to what it has to say, and then move on.
Yeah, and that's also sort of what we always, I think we kind of get away from it, that we always pull ourselves back to this podcast, really what we're trying to accomplish on this podcast, which is just to be real. That's why we call it the real life hustle.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we are all about, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I think we want to speak about the things that no one else is talking about, right? Like we listen to a lot of business podcasts, or we used to at least. And
why, like you said, we used to, and I think we both kind of feel the same way when it comes to used to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've sort of both, I can speak for myself anyway. I've sort of given up on business podcasts. At least I try and maintain a very strict diet on business podcasts because they just are too much sometimes, and they get me feeling
inadequate
and low. Yeah, because you just
it's like the imposter and comparison thing.
Yeah, you listen to these other people doing all these great things, and it's just you're voluntarily tuning in to the imposter radio, and if you want to, they're a great place to learn, but it's also, I started finding it's hard to maintain my own focus and what I'm doing when I'm listening to everyone else telling me what I should be doing instead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, as long as I have a game plan for myself and my game plan is well thought out and I'm executing it, I've just decided that, like, listening to, Grant Cardone tell me about how I should be investing in real estate, and listening to this person tell me how I should be, doing that, and this person, it's just like, I'd rather just listen to political like things.
Oh yeah.
It's like, the political podcasts I listen to, those are also getting me depressed, but at least in a different way.
Yeah, at first I liked them too. I thought it was like real reality TV, but then I realized, no, this is real life. I was like, oh, this is not so funny anymore.
The point is like, I just decided to, like, the majority of the podcasts I listen to just to scratch a different itch, to, like, it doesn't need to be all about business. So with our podcast, and I think we have to keep bringing ourselves back to this point, but to keep reminding ourselves what our mission statement is, and I think what people want the most from us, and that's just being real, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about necessarily telling you what to do, but it's just sharing some of the mindset, I guess, is I think that is our sweet spot, if you will.
Because I think that I'm with you. Like, I don't really listen to podcasts anymore. One, because I don't drive as much, but two, because it gets you into that comparison situation. And I know that I don't have time to feel bad about where I'm at or what I'm doing. And in fact, even with coaches, like, I've realized that no matter who I hire, like, I want to make sure that I am following the game plan that I want. And they're only there to, like, help me with my own mindset around it, and maybe teach me a couple of things, but not to tell me on the direction that I should go with my business. So same thing with podcasts. Like, I don't want to be told what direction I should go with my business, because in fact, every time I just follow someone else's teachings, I end up going away from the things that I should really be doing. And I think that on the inside, we know our inner guidance tells us the direction that we should go and where we feel called to go. Whether there's fear around that is a different story. But aside from that, like, I don't want to just follow someone blindly because it worked for someone else. Just because something worked for someone else doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for me. And I've learned that the hard way over and over again the past couple of years, is that I do know the direction that I want to go with my business and what I want it to look like. And every time I listen to business podcasts, they're just like giving you a new idea. And that just distracts me from the direction I was going. It's a distraction.
I don't need more ideas. Mm-hmm. I have my idea and I want to stay focused on it. So listening to podcasts that keep filling me with new ideas, it's like,
and it's information overload, right? It's frustrating, and it's information overload to the point that, like, now you're like, oh, maybe I should do this. And I think the thing that we really need to remember is that every podcast out there does have their own interests at heart. Like, there's a reason why they're promoting whatever they're promoting, right? There's a reason that they're talking about that. I mean, if they're being strategic about it, then there is a reason. So we have to remember that like they are grooming you. If you're listening to their podcast, they're grooming you to want to purchase something from them. Like Grant Cardone is grooming you to purchase one of his courses, right? So outside of that, like you really need to keep that in mind when you're listening. Because maybe I'm just very skeptical, but I definitely think that it just gets you to a point where you think you need so much. And the thing that you need is really to trust your own intuition and your own inner guidance and follow that and not feel like you're not enough or like you're an imposter because you are not doing that, which is what they do, is they make you feel bad about the direction you're going in. And I don't think that that's in service to anyone. And it's certainly not something that I'm going to choose to listen to. So I'm with you on really being very selective on what I listen to and who I follow. And yeah, like I think that will also get you into a downward spiral of not feeling like enough. And we all have enough in situations in our life that already do that. So I think it's about taking time to remember why you're even on this path. Why are you doing this? Why did you start your business? Why do people need you? And who do you help? Because that's always what gets me back into it, is like, where can I be of service? Whenever I'm actually helping someone, I'm re-energized. And every time I'm not working with someone, that's when I'm not feeling energetic about my business. It's like I'm doing all the things that don't fill me up and not actually helping people. So whenever I feel down or like an imposter, Mike, is that I always go to, how can I help someone today? And see where that takes me.
And that's a wrap on another episode of How We Hustle. For more information, check out howwehustlepodcast.com.